You either break or become ruthless. This is not advice. It's the ultimate warning. If you don't learn to be tough, the world will crush you without mercy. There is no safe zone, no illusions of kindness or fairness. Every failure, every betrayal is a testing blade. If you are weak, you shatter. If you are alert, you become ruthless. Control or be controlled. Wake up before it's too late, because mercy will not protect the weak in life's storm. When all favorable conditions vanish, a person's true nature is revealed. Some break, shattering in panic, swallowed by their own emotions. Others become cold, alert, and ruthless, not because they've lost their humanity, but because they've surpassed the limits ordinary people can endure. Consider the teacher who once believed that love alone could transform any student. After years of repeated laziness and betrayal, he realized that kindness is not always the solution. Sometimes it only delays awakening. He stopped being lenient. He demanded discipline, strictness, even cold precision. Some called him changed. But perhaps he had only abandoned the illusion that everyone wants to be saved. Or the mother who believed her sacrifices would earn her children's gratitude. Alone, in a cold house, she discovered that her children learned only to take, never to give. She realized that boundless gentleness could be mistaken for obligation. She began setting boundaries, saying no for the first time. Some called her selfish. Yet it was, in that moment, she truly began to exist as a person, rather than as a shadow of unconditional love. And in the workplace, where a single mistake can cost you your position, the young professional who once believed that sincerity and hard work guaranteed recognition discovered that cunning advancement often outpaces merit. He learned to negotiate, to keep secrets, to protect himself from backstabs. He did not become cruel, he became wiser. So where lies the boundary between alertness and ruthlessness, between strength and coldness? When we become ruthless, are we living more authentically, or merely donning armor to shield ourselves from the fear of breaking? Perhaps no one truly wants to be ruthless. We simply refuse to break, refuse to be crushed by the world. Ultimately, severity does not demand choosing between kindness and coldness. It demands learning how to protect the heart from corruption, while remaining strong enough not to shatter. For sometimes, survival does not mean victory. It means preserving the human part of ourselves, however fragile. In a world that compels us to become steel, the psychology of ruthlessness, not ice, but control. True ruthlessness is not about hurting others. It is the ability to prevent the mind from being swept away by emotion, especially when everything inside is collapsing. The ruthless are not numb. They feel deeply, but they choose not to act on impulse. Weakness is a reflex. Control is a choice. Finn's psychology. Those who have endured profound shocks often respond in one of two ways. Either they are consumed by emotion, or they learn to lock away part of themselves to survive. This is not coldness. It is the mind's survival mechanism. Once you have been hurt for trusting the wrong people, you begin to understand. Misplaced compassion is a dagger turned inward, and not everyone deserves the kindest part of you. From a strategic perspective, ruthlessness is the ability to separate emotion from decision. A leader in crisis cannot act on pity or fear. He must see both the people and the board. He must know who to save, who to cut off, and when to remain silent. At such moments, undisciplined kindness can collapse the entire system. Machiavelli once said, "If you must choose, let them fear you rather than love you." Not because he worshipped cruelty, but because he understood love is the most fickle of forces in politics. While fear preserves order, on a personal level, the ruthless are not necessarily more successful. They are those who no longer let the world dictate their reactions. They don't text in anger, cry before those who hurt them, or retaliate with emotion. They observe, analyze, and act when necessary. Few words, but precise action. This is difficult, because human instinct gravitates toward immediate emotion. Yet, those who master restraint seize power. Philosophically, true ruthlessness is a form of freedom. When you are no longer controlled by emotion, praise, or pity, you escape the most insidious power of all, manipulation. You become the chooser of your responses, rather than the lead. Ruthlessness is not ice. It is control, a calm forged through wounds. The truly ruthless are not indifferent. They have learned that emotions need not vanish, only be placed in the right context. In this world, those who cannot control themselves will be controlled by others. The ruthless, however, understand that sometimes the greatest kindness is no longer allowing one's compassion to be a social perspective. Ruthless as a survival mechanism. In modern society, being ruthless, controlled ruthlessness, is often seen as a negative trait. People admire kindness, tolerance, and generosity. Yet, look closely, and you'll see that the world does not operate on goodwill alone. It runs on power, self-interest, and the ability to maintain control. In an environment where everyone is striving to gain more, the overly soft are shaped by the stronger and tougher. Ruthlessness, therefore, is no longer a moral choice. It is a survival mechanism. At work, you may have met colleagues who are always ready to help, to yield, to cover others' mistakes. They are loved until the day they are undermined by the very people they supported. Kindness is not wrong, but without boundaries, it becomes an open invitation to exploitation. The ruthless know when to give and when to stop. They are not cold. They understand their own value and refuse to let anyone define it for them. At a macro level, social systems operate on similar principles. Developed nations maintain their position not through compassion, but through discipline, calculation, and strength. They may offer humanitarian aid, but behind it lies a carefully calculated geopolitical strategy. A capable leader cannot be good alone. They must know when to be firm and when to strike. Otherwise, their own generosity will consume them. From a psychological perspective, ruthlessness helps people preserve self. When you learn not to let anyone trample your boundaries, you regain control over your life. That is why those who have endured deep trauma often appear eerily calm. They understand that reacting too quickly is a loss of power. Instead, they observe, calculate, and act when all variables are under their grasp. But remember, ruthless is not synonymous with cruelty. It is the art of living alert amidst a layered, deceptive world. The truly ruthless do not need to step on others to rise. They simply refuse to let anyone pull them down. It is inward ruthlessness, cutting illusions, forcing oneself to be strong. Ultimately, society does not reward the weak-hearted, but those who can remain steadfast amid chaos. Kindness retains its value, but only when built on discipline and boundaries. If you are not ruthless enough to protect yourself, the world will teach you, and it will do so far more brutally. The philosophy of limits. Ruthless toward the world or yourself. Ruthlessness, when viewed through a philosophical lens, is not only an attitude toward others, but also an attitude toward oneself. The truly ruthless are not necessarily cruel to others. They are merciless with the weak parts inside themselves. They cut away habits that cause self-harm, eliminate illusions, and confront the harsh truths about themselves and the world. It may sound cold, but it is the only way to protect the mind and will from erosion. From a psychological perspective, humans often live by illusions that kindness will always be reciprocated, that fairness exists, that everyone has good intentions. But harsh reality allows no lasting weakness. Those who are too soft, too trusting, are tested and often crushed. Deep wounds teach a personal lesson. Not everyone deserves your compassion. The ruthless learn to accept this. They establish principles and adhere to them, even at the cost of temporary emotional discomfort. From a societal viewpoint, internal ruthlessness becomes a tool for survival and advancement. In a world governed by power and self-interest, those who lack boundaries are shaped by others. They allow emotion to dictate action, fragility to guide them, and ultimately they become puppets in the hands of those who exploit weakness. In contrast, those who cultivate ruthlessness toward themselves, cutting off misplaced trust, not letting emotions control actions, gain freedom. They rely neither on praise nor forgiveness, and their actions become precise, purposeful, and powerful. For example, a business leader once believed that transparency and kindness would earn absolute loyalty from employees. After repeated exploitation and betrayal, he realized that unconditional kindness could be a deadly weakness in business. He began applying strict principles. Anyone who disrespected boundaries or refused responsibility was removed from the system. He did not become cruel. He became disciplined with the standards he once trusted. The philosophy here is clear. Ruthlessness is not a weapon aimed at others, but armor that protects the soul and personal power. It is the strategic awareness that if you are not merciless with yourself first, you will lack the strength to withstand the pressures of the world. Finally, the image is etched in the mind. A person standing on a cliff as a storm rages, unshaken by anything around them, not because they feel nothing, but because they have learned to be ruthless with the weakness within, simply to survive and move forward. In this world, sometimes strength is not about defeating others, but about refusing to be crushed yourself. Conclusion. There is no middle ground, only choice. In life, the saying "you either break or become ruthless" is not merely a pessimistic observation. It is a cold reality. When pressures mount and trust is repeatedly betrayed, a person is forced to choose, shatter, or learn to be tough to the point of ruthlessness. There is no safe zone in between softness and sharpness. Only clear consequences exist. Either you are crushed or you learn to maintain your position. From a psychological perspective, humans crave acceptance and the ability to accept, but when every belief is shattered, when compassion and kindness are repeatedly exploited, inner security vanishes. Those who break lose control, letting emotion override reason. It is this very softness that becomes a fatal weakness. In contrast, the ruthless learn not to let emotion dictate action, train themselves according to principles, and set boundaries to protect themselves. They do not become cruel for no reason. They become clearer-minded, knowing when to soften, when to harden. From a social strategy viewpoint, those who do not cultivate sharpness are shaped by the world. In competitive environments, kindness is not always returned with kindness. The insufficiently tough are quickly eliminated, manipulated, or caught in the traps of subtle power games. Conversely, those who master controlled ruthlessness retain authority, preserve their position, and protect what matters most. They are not merciless toward the world. They simply refuse to allow the world to be merciless toward them. For example, a person who once lived by trust in friends and social fairness, after repeated betrayals, no longer waits for rescue. They learn to observe, analyze, and act according to clear principles. They do not change their nature. They simply abandon illusions, and in doing so, grow stronger. The final, profound, and strategic message is this: not everyone must become ruthless, but those who lack the sharpness to protect themselves will be crushed. Learning to be tough is not about losing humanity. It is about preserving it amid a world full of trials. The lasting image is of a person standing firm amid a storm, unmoved by anyone or anything, not because they feel nothing, but because they have chosen not to break. In life, survival is sometimes simply the ability to remain unbent amid the endless pressures of the world.